Hello, this is Matt.
Hey, Matt.
How's it going?
It's going really well.
Nice to meet you.
So, Somni is a startup that went through startup school from Y Combinator. And what you guys are doing, and at least from my perception, is you're almost like the sleep kit for anyone looking to get a better night's sleep. And I think that's something that actually intrigued me. And I think there's a lot of people out there that actually have horrible sleep. When we actually met, and the story of us meeting was kind of interesting. I was an advisor to startup school, and then Matt actually went through startup school. So we went to an event at Y Combinator. I think it was like a few months ago. Y Combinator actually brought all of the alumni in that went through startup school, and Matt actually was there, and we kind of ran into each other. And then Matt, you started this sleep company. So that's kind of like how we met. So I guess, Matt, maybe you could give us like a little bit about who you are, like your past, and why sleep out of all these different types of startups that you could do.
Yeah, of course. And thanks so much for having me, guys. Really glad to be here. So
Thank you.
What we're doing at Somni is we're doing the Omada Health but for sleep. And for those who don't know what Omada Health is, we're working on digital behavioral change for health. We focus that specifically on sleep. So we work to help people actually make lifestyle changes when it comes to their sleep, because we fundamentally believe it's a critical, really foundational piece to health, to good health at least. And a little backstory. So Daniel and I, we met at a Y Combinator event after going through the startup school. And I don't know, it was sort of luck or fate, but we bumped into each other and ended up chatting for probably the whole night. It seemed like, and stayed in touch since. And it was really, really great to meet and share all the information we did. And I think one of the things that's important in our story, and I think some backstory, is this problem was something that personally I had struggled with for a lot of years as a college student, and in a lot of ways not really knowing about it as much. I mean, I knew I was a bad sleeper, but I just didn't realize how bad of a sleeper. I went to Notre Dame for undergrad, and it wasn't until my senior year where I actually had a sleep crisis from really 4 years of not doing sleep right. And like so many college students, it's sort of this I'll sleep when I'm dead badge of honor, and it's one of the last things you sort of think about because you think you're invincible as a student. And it turns out I took this course my senior year, the seminar all on sleep and the brain and the body and how it benefits us. And it was one of those aha moments where I realized I was doing everything completely wrong. And so for me, it was this slap in the moment face of, geez, Matt, you're just being a complete, knucklehead when it comes to this incredibly important thing in your life. And then I began to look around and not only change my lifestyle, my habits, and became very protective of my sleep, and started taking power naps and naps every day, and started to really take care of that time and cherish it versus think of it as a waste of time. And I saw incredible benefits on my own life. And then I started to look around and saw that, I wasn't the only student struggling with this. And then the thought became, well, it's actually not just students. It's much more than students. It's business professionals, it's doctors, it's athletes, it's many different walks of life. And so that's how we started Somni. And then we grabbed a bunch of folks who are designers and sleep specialists and developers, and we started to work on this problem. So that's kind of how it all started.
So when you were able to kind of correct your sleep patterns, was it 100% under your control, like sort of different behaviors you were able to adapt to, or were there some elements that were not under your control as much?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So the thing about, I always jokingly say that we're in the business of behavior change, actually. So we're actually trying to actively influence someone's behaviors in the right direction. And behaviors are a really tricky thing. And, we had to do a lot of learning and research into actually how behaviors are formed and also unformed. And changing someone's behavior is actually a really, really tricky sort of equation to crack. And what I actually found for me, it was sort of, I first had to understand, you always see these things in the news, like you need to get 8 hours of sleep, or if you don't sleep enough, this X, Y, Z bad thing will happen to you. But really, it starts with like a foundational understanding. And so, for me, it was this course and just seeing all the research and the data behind it. So the sleep field and sleep neuroscience has been really blossoming in the last decade, and this information is pouring out of there, showing that sleep benefits everything from creativity to emotional health and well-being to ability to have insights and learning and memory. All of these higher order of functions that so many of us rely on to be effective. That for me was a no-brainer in terms of like my performance as a human will be better. I'll just be a better human with sleep. And so it started there. And then from there, changing the habits is actually pretty difficult because you've got these sometimes years of ingrained practices that you have to either unwind or find creative ways to modify them. And so we tried actually a lot of things early on. And a big part of our program now is based on all the many iterations we went through, and both personally and then doing really sort of evidence-based trials with students where we could actually look at people who are, some of the worst sleepers, arguably, and learn from them and use their bad habits or practices to form how our program currently works. And so one of the biggest things for me and most difficult was, and I think a lot of people in the program struggle with, is the trying to separate technology from sleep and actually caps on technology from your phone and your computer and the internet at night, and how that's one of the biggest things to crack for me personally, but a lot of people struggle with that. But it's these things that are so ingrained in our behaviors and our patterns for years that until you actively start and try and manage them, they can be sort of silent killers. Have your phone and your pillow, or being on your computer too late, things like that, and they can really wreak havoc on you. That was just one example, but there's many things that are part of the equation.
One question I had for you is, it looks like you guys are trying to build like a whole comprehensive package out, and doing a little research on the site, and it said you get a health coach to help you. Is that correct?
Yeah. So one of the things we found through our research was that people, to change behaviors, it really helps when you have someone sitting on the opposite side of the table that, one, cares about the individual and is also can also hold them accountable in a loose way. This isn't sort of a strict boot camp instructor, but it's someone who, at the end of the day, they help them, nudge them towards the right behaviors and habits. And so we offer a sleep coach in the program so people can actually connect with them and help them if they have any questions or they have things that's specific to them, and actually look at their sleep patterns and monitor them for anything serious. So we think that's a really critical component to the change model. We, at the end of the day, saw that software alone without humans behind it wasn't enough. And that's kind of where that decision is been born out of.
What are some of the components of the package that you would provide your customers to help them with their sleep?
Great question. So we offer a sleep toolkit. We've also looked at this problem in a very holistic sense, in the sense that we don't think that people should necessarily reach for a new mattress or a sleeping pill or go right to a sleep doctor when they're trying to fix their sleep. And you can think about this anecdotally in the sense that, it really doesn't matter what mattress you're sleeping on. If you're slamming caffeine, or you don't understand how alcohol influences your sleep, or you don't get how light influences sleep, things like that. You could sleep on the nicest mattress, but you could still get poor sleep. And so we also don't think that people should go to get a sleeping pill right away either, because that can be loaded with negative side effects. There's actually a ton of downside for taking sleeping pills. In many ways, we don't think it outweighs the upside, and it should really be used on a very temporary, as-needed basis. And so part of the idea with the kit is that we want to start with low-hanging fruits that are affordable for the general population. We don't think you should have to take out another monthly, payment on a mattress. And there isn't really a lot of evidence actually that shows that there's a ton of variance in mattress and the quality of sleep you get. And that, to us, we started with this kit. And so we include things to improve the environment. So we include things like eye masks, white noise machines, lavender aromatherapy, earplugs, nasal strips, breathing sprays for the nose and airway. We include liquid melatonin and blue light blocking glasses. And, we have the ability to add and subtract things very easily to that kit, if we find other things that are beneficial. But we found that those items combined, if someone's never, been exposed to good sleep or doesn't know where to start, that's a really good place for people, because it can take most environments and make them really sleep friendly without breaking the bank and without having any sort of chemical addiction as well. So that was kind of the idea behind the kit.
And what are some of the strategies that the sleep coach uses to improve people's sleep? Like, for example, making journals, maybe some kind of app to determine if people are moving. I think there's like different technologies that some people wear, like on their wrists, to track if they're sleeping or not.
Great question. So one of the things we use for tracking sleep, we use off-the-shelf third-party wearables. So we use things like Fitbits and Apple Watches to take someone's sleep data, and we'll pull that right into a dashboard that the sleep coach can take a look at. along with the user. And if they don't have a sleep watch or sleep tracking sort of apparatus, we are fine with them actually manually entering their sleep. And the reason for this is we don't want this to be prohibitive from people who, again, if you don't own a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to participate. And we also think the biggest thing that we're trying to do here is drive awareness. And so it's sort of like if you've ever tracked a diet or an exercise routine, tracking your sleep can be the same way, where you're starting to shine that light of awareness on how you're sleeping. And that can be really great just for starting to notice the changes between your performance one day or your emotional state and, how you slept the night before. A lot of people don't know this, but if you are sleep deprived, even by a small amount from what your needs are, your resting cortisol levels the following day will actually higher. So you're more prone to have sort of a stressful reaction to something the next day. And so we help people start to identify these patterns. And the sleep coach will actually take that data actively and use it to inform the feedback loop with the user. So the sleep coach will take a look at their data input that they're actively collecting from the Fitbit or from the journal entries on our dashboard. And they'll use that to sort of nudge the user in the right direction. So for example, they see the night before they had a really poor night of sleep or didn't get the sort of the quantity of sleep they should get. They recommend taking a short nap of a certain amount of length, certain time of day, or nudge them in the evening. It's time to go to bed, and kind of give them a reminder if they've sort of been off schedule for the last few days to make sure they're kind of getting on track. Consistency is a really big thing when it comes to sleep. And so the coaches are there to help drive that behavior or change with the user and help them become more aware of habits they may not even be aware of. So that's sort of their strategy and their function.
And I'm kind of curious how you get your customers. Do you do advertising online? Or are you connected with some sleep clinics?
So we actually got our first customers. We did a college tour. So we did a college tour with Arianna Huffington called the Sleep Revolution, which we did last summer, actually. We went to about 15 major universities across the country. So University of Chicago, UCLA, USC, Duke, Ohio State, to name a few. And that was how we got our first customers, who were students. And, we really started with students because that was the most, home place to start for me, or the most logical place to start, given that I had just been a student. But now our customers, we partner with sleep clinics and really anyone who struggles with sleep. So our some of our biggest partners right now are sleep clinics, where people are coming there and the doctors need a solution for sleep hygiene and behavioral sleep health that they don't have. And, they're struggling to do this with their patients, because the issue there is that patients, they only get really a few touch points with the doctor, and our solution is much more prescriptive over time and allows the doctor to have continuous engagement with the patients. We also get a lot of some of our customers from companies. So we work with a lot of corporate wellness groups to help employees sleep better. There's actually a recent study that was done last year where companies who have sleep-deprived employees, it'll cost the employer on average about $3,200 more per year, given that sleep-deprived employees make mistakes and their sick days and sort of repeated work. We work with them as well. And more recently, we're starting to work with athletic teams and athletes who know that sleep's a really critical part of their performance. So we work with a lot of walks of life, and so that's kind of our user base right now.
For corporate wellness, that's a really interesting vertical where a lot of corporations are looking to take better care of their employees. And you mentioned Omada. So Omada, I don't think a lot of people know who Omada is unless you're actually offered that at your job. Omada does, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about like what they do, chronic disease management or...
Exactly. So Omada does chronic disease management for type 2 diabetes. And I don't know if it's specifically only type 2. They may have changed it now to include a broader set of conditions, but I know they initially started out by treating diabetes. They have a 16-week health program that helps people who are pre-diabetic or just lapsed into diabetes work their way out of diabetes. And it's through a combination of coaching and educational content and monitoring and sort of, iterative feedback with the user to help them seed and propagate healthy habits. And so they work with a lot of companies to help get ahead of the diabetes problem, because there's such a huge healthcare cost for an employee who has diabetes. So they help reduce that expense for companies.
So you guys are doing something very similar where you're actually doing that for sleep, and everybody is trying to get a better night's sleep. The stress of life keeps people up and their phone buzzing all the time. So one question I have for you is, what is the future of an employee And where do you see you guys fitting into that? Say you have like these really large organizations and you have employees that are under immense stress, whether it be like a food store or even corporate setting or factories where people are working extreme hours. Where do you see your company fitting in all of those types of settings?
The way we think about it is we're optimistic about the fact that everyone needs good sleep to have a really flourishing career and flourishing life. And if you look at any study as it relates to physical health or emotional well-being or cognitive performance, there is usually some link between negative sleep and worse outcomes. And so what we're optimistic about is that there are many different sectors of this vertical that we think really could use attention. My vision for the future, though, is that people who are struggling with sleep, especially at an employee level for a company, it becomes really much more of a focal point of the company and the employee to take care of them, because it'll end up ultimately impacting the bottom line. And you can see this through employees who are either sick or emotionally burnt out or cognitively not all there. And at the end of the day, sleep is really the ultimate performance enhancer for all of these things. And the best part about it is that there's no side effects and it's essentially free. And so this has become a much more common and accepted sort of trend to really protect and take care of sleep within companies. You know, some companies we've worked with so far have actually, after going through Somni, have adopted napping rooms in their offices, given once they see the results and the data behind naps, just how beneficial they are, and start to take care of this for their employees. And so really our hope is that companies will really take after this and take care of it in the sense that, you know, it only stands to benefit the company by taking care of their employees at an emotional, physical, and cognitive level through better sleep, you know, preventing burnout and improving employee performance. So our hope is that really this becomes much more prevalent than it already is, and we can continue to reach other verticals such as the airline industry or shift working industry. That's a really big one. Trucking is a huge issue with sleep. Obviously, anyone who's using their mind as a creative or intellectual pursuit, sleep only stands to benefit them. So, you know, we really have a lot of work cut out for us is what we hope. So that's kind of where I see it going.
I was kind of curious about if you had any theories about sleep that drive your recommendations or coaching. For example, I took a class at Stanford on sleep and read the book William Dement's The Promise of Sleep. And he talked about sleep debt, where he had this kind of metaphor of like, you know, you have a sleep need, like let's say it's 8 hours, and you need that every day. And for each hour you don't get, it ends up being kind of a brick that goes into your backpack. And then if you consistently get only say 6 hours, then every day there's 2 hours of bricks that go in your backpack. And then eventually you kind of crash because it becomes too much, like you get sick and you like literally have to repay that in order to go back to equilibrium. Are there any like ideas like that, theories or concepts that you teach to your customers?
It's a great question. And yeah, William Dement's book, The Promise of Sleep, if anyone is new to sleep and wants a great read, that is often considered sort of the Bible of sleep. He's really the grandfather of all things sleep. He's a professor at Stanford, which definitely highly recommend that book. And yes, the idea of sleep debt is definitely one we push in terms of making people aware of that. And, you know, this is something you should really consider within your decision-making process every night and how you set your priorities. You know, because just over time, you're needing to cut away sleep to take care of things or to be more productive. That's only going to come back and haunt you, you know, in the future. And there's really no way to escape your biology very easily when it comes to sleep. And people often think that it's something they can cheat and get around, but there's really no evidence to date when it comes to data on, you know, people's actually objective performance that they can cut away sleep and in the long run improve their, you know, their quality of health and performance. And so one of the things we often talk about in our Foundations of Sleep program is that, you know, making people aware that their brain really is their most important asset, and that sleep is incredibly tied to your brain's function and performance. And so your brain is really the only organ you can no longer replace. And it's everything from your creativity to your memories, to your relationships, to your, you know, decision-making process, your source of income even. We say that, you know, sleep is one of the best things you can do for your brain. And so we really drive that point home and helping people see that through examples and through awareness activities, such as tracking their sleep and looking for patterns and things like that. But helping them understand this really intimate link between sleep and the brain and then their quality of life is something that we found is really helpful in driving behavior change at sort of a fundamental level. And then using that to dictate a lot of our or guide a lot of our principles for the program.
As you mentioned blue light, I don't know if a lot of people know what blue light is. And also there's things like Apple has changed the iPhone. So there's this little setting there now that helps with blue light. What is it, and does it affect us, and what can we do to, and I guess, remove blue light, and when do we need blue light? And is that something that's real?
It's something that I didn't even know about just a few years ago until I even took this course, and it absolutely blew my mind. Blue light is a potent brain stimulator, and this is believed to be because of the way we've evolved with the blue sky and being sort of a signal that it's daytime and that it's time to begin our day. And so the brain is actually on a very rhythmic schedule when it comes to hormones throughout the day. This is something that is loosely called, or actually not, I don't know if loosely, but it's called chronobiology. And it's really the idea that your hormones fluctuate on sort of rhythmic schedules throughout a period of time. And one of the influencers of studying that cadence is blue light. And the issue with blue light is that if you have it at the wrong points of day, it can be really detrimental to your sleep. And so looking at, blue light in the morning is great for waking you up and alerting your mind. And it's in a lot of ways, it's almost like a cup of coffee for your brain. So if you were struggling to wake up in the morning, one of the things we recommend in our program is that you get out and take your glasses off, either on the drive to work or just get out and get some sunshine right in the morning. And that will actually help set your circadian rhythm and pace for the day. Conversely, if you look at blue light at night, either through your phone or through a light bulb, that's in your ceiling or your TV screen or your computer screen, or even sometimes your alarm clock, there can be trace amounts of this blue light. It can actually be really detrimental to allowing your body to secrete melatonin. And so what they found in a study now several years ago was that blue light actually suppressed the secretion of melatonin. And for those people who might not know, melatonin is a very potent sleep hormone that your body produces naturally. And the great thing about melatonin is that it's involved with a tremendous amount of recovery and repair processes. It sort of sets off a cascade of events that allow the body to heal and repair itself during the course of the night. Interestingly, there are several oncologists that we work with closely who prescribe heavy doses of melatonin to any patients going through a chemotherapy treatment. It's one of the first things they do to help them with the healing process and extending their chance of survival is heavy doses of melatonin because of its potency in the recovery and healing process. And so the issue with blue light is you obviously want your melatonin every night for so many reasons. And the issue with blue light is it actually suppresses it because when our body sees blue light, it thinks, oh, it's morning time. I shouldn't need any melatonin. And the thing is our biology is not caught up with the pace of our technology by any sense of the means. And so we have all these great devices and tools, but they're tricking our brains in so many ways. And that's leading to a real erosion in the sleep quality for, the general population. Blue light is one of the ways, but there are a lot of other ways that technology can damage sleep. But that's one that's it's very common. And yeah, there's companies that are doing great things to combat that, like Apple and some of the other software services you can do to install and change or remove some of the blue light from your phone or your tablets, your computers late at night. One of the good ones we like to recommend is f.lux, f.lux, for people on their computers. We also will recommend certain light bulbs in the house to remove blue light at night and things like that. Anything you can do to really limit that exposure to blue light at night will only stand to benefit your quality of sleep.
Just on that note of the blue light, what have been some of the most effective strategies that you've recommended to cure insomnia? So I think blue light minimization at night is a common recommendation, but are there any others?
Yeah, blue light is definitely one. The one really big one tied to that is just removing all electronics from the bedroom. And, I don't know where this idea sort of crept up on us in society, but having phones and TVs and any sort of gadgets that are, other than your mattress and your pillows and whatever, you need for sleeping really shouldn't be in the bedroom. And so we find that one of a really, really powerful driver to good sleep is just the act of removing your phone from the bedroom and any other sort of electronics. And this is for a couple of reasons. I don't know if we want to get into those now, but there can be so many downsides from having those in the bedroom, the blue light being one of them, and then stimulus psychologically stimulating, and then also the electromagnetic radiation can interfere with sleep. Even though it's a small level, it can still negatively influence sleep. The other big things we found is that two other big things. When we get asked what are some of the low-hanging fruits people can do are routine and consistency. So the brain loves consistency, and in our world today, there seems to be this consistency doesn't seem to be something we all have the luxury of having anymore. But if there's any way you can consistently sleep at the right times and go to bed and get up at the right times, that's incredibly powerful for your brain's daily rhythm and your hormone schedules. Connected to that is the idea of power napping for sleep deprivation or sleep debt, or just to get a performance boost cognitively. So we like to recommend sleeping either 20 or 90-minute naps in the afternoon, sometime between 1 and 3, when you have a natural dip in your body's cortisol. And this can be a really powerful way to either catch up on sleep debt from the night before if you haven't slept enough, or to get a quick brain boost in the middle of the day. There are studies that have shown that just a 20 to 30-minute nap can actually yield some of the same cognitive benefits, memory and creatively on tasks, that a full night of sleep does. It's not quite the same as a full night of sleep, but it's really, really close in some measures. And you can almost think of it as like cleaning the cache, midway through the day. And that's one thing, that really helps. So if I have to say some things can really help with driving good sleep, it's trying to include or establish those three things in your sleep habit.
I think one thing also that's super interesting about our society is they really deter us from sleep. Like there's, the saying, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I don't sleep, I just work. So there's a lot of cultural stress amongst, I would say, everyone, where a lot of our society tries to push people to work harder, but that doesn't actually necessarily mean that they're being more effective. I commend you, Matt, trying to say, no, that's not the right way to think about things. Don't just work 24/7 because you're not going to be productive. And that's one of the things I'm getting from this talk with you. I'm actually reading a book called Sleep Smarter from Sean Stevenson right now. And there's some disturbing things in that book that he had mentioned. He mentioned there's a few studies that say cancer is linked to lack of sleep. Things like that. I'm like, wow, there's more that comes from sleep than just feeling good throughout the day and being more effective. It definitely affects your body in so many different ways. One thing that you mentioned is you went on a tour with Arianna Huffington. I know she's kind of on this big push for sleep. So tell me, how did you get on that tour with her and what happened with that?
We had just started Somni recently before that, and I had written a piece for them on the HuffingtonPost.com just on sleep and sort of our philosophy. They had reached out to us, and we got a call like a month later about, hey, we're doing this thing for college students, and it's all going to be focused on sleep. And her idea was that these college students are really the next generation of workers for us. And they're sort of the up and coming members of society, and we should really instill in them some of this importance of sleep. And so she had just written this book actually called The Sleep Revolution, and it was tied to the release of that book. And so her idea was to go to all these major schools and distribute the importance of sleep to college students, because, in so many ways for college students, it's really one of the first things they should be taught. And you can think about it because, if you understand the link between sleep and learning, there's really no way you can learn effectively without getting quality sleep. And so as a student, sort of trying to sacrifice sleep or cut away sleep or just not getting the right sleep you need while you're basically a professional learner, that, many of these students are paying, now the price of college anywhere between, $100,000 and $250,000, you really need to be sleeping your best, especially if you want to be an effective worker and land the job you want to get and, make the most of your education. There's oftentimes in almost every school before, we actually even started this, we found that there was no real resources available for students and their sleep hygiene or their sleep health or sleep education. Even in their first, there might be a pamphlet or something or two at a college resource center, but there was nothing prescriptive to actually help these students. One, if they got themselves into a sleep crisis, or two, if they just wanted to establish good, healthy behaviors getting into college. And, the other, really terrible thing about college in some ways is they pack all these students into these dorms that are dirty and old and loud and noisy. And then they slam them with, 10 hours of 5 to 10 hours of classwork or studying every day, and then they expect these students to learn and retain that. And there's just so many issues there. So Arianna was trying to change that through really awareness movement by writing this book and going to these schools and speaking. And they invited us to be a product partner on that tour. And it was really great for us in the sense that we got to meet all these college students up front. And we actually had these huge turnouts at these events. They weren't just a few 50 to 100 people. Some of these events were thousands of students coming out and wanting to learn more about sleep and take care of their health. And so I think it was a good sign for us, so showing that students really wanted it, they were interested in this topic and they cared about it, and that there's a real need there. That was really encouraging for us from a company standpoint to continue to pursue this vein with students and try and work with these schools to get involved. And the unfortunate thing we found was that a lot of these students at the schools, schools often didn't want to, maybe either didn't understand or didn't want to provide this for their students because it was another cost for them. And for whatever reason, obviously costs are always trying to be controlled, and this didn't really make it to the top of their priority list. So we're always trying to find creative ways to work with universities and schools. Students can get access to something like this. But yeah, that was a little bit of that story and how it all came to be. It was very, very good timing for us in terms of how it all played out.
I'm kind of curious about your journey in entrepreneurship. Did you start your business, and are you bootstrapping? And also, what strategies have you been using to keep your burn rate low?
Before I was doing this, I was working for a early stage drug development company that was working on rare and neglected disease for neurologic conditions, and that was sort of my first experience with startups. And we had to raise our own funds and go through regulatory process with the FDA and discover and do the whole design process for drugs and work through clinical trials and things like that. So I did that for a few years after graduating, and then this was something I had been sort of playing around with on the side in terms of these ideas and around sleep, having this really transformative personal experience on my own. I was like, wow, I think this is not something that just I'm struggling with, but I think there's probably so many other people in the same situation that I'm in. And it's one of these things where it's like, I just didn't know. And I thought I was doing everything right as a student, but I was actually doing everything wrong. And so I was thinking to myself, like, wow, this is probably the most influential course I took in my entire, time in college, at least, if not the most, top 2 or 3. And I think almost every other student is probably in my same shoes or like struggling with something similar or a very large percentage of them. And then the thought became, wow, this could be even more than that. And so in terms of people who need something like this. And so we started this journey about around 2 years ago now. And we have been really trying to solve this problem creatively and do our best to create something that can actually meaningfully drive behavior change. To date, we've actually been bootstrapping everything. So we've actually, out of some conversations, we've had with some folks and some reading and things, we've actually gone the bootstrap route. Really meaningful conversation that actually influenced my thinking on this was I had a conversation. I'm from Chicago, and I was lucky to meet Jason Fried over at Basecamp.
Nice.
Those guys are pretty, notorious for their story and how they built Basecamp, and he really left an impression on me through speaking with him and some of his writings on what bootstrapping really means and how it forces you to make profitable decisions from the beginning, just philosophically what that means from a sort of the long-term horizon of the company. And, we're not like totally, this is the only way to go, and it just certainly could change at some point, but we've just been doing it this way to this point, given those conversations and our thinking. And
yeah, I'm a huge fan of Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansen. Did you use some of his books like Rework or Remote as kind of a guide, or was it really just conversations with him?
Yeah, it was all three actually. Yeah, it was both of his books and then conversations with him. I think it's really refreshing his thought line, and I think if you actually talk to him and you get to understand the reasons why and how they kind of cut scope on things and don't let the unit economics get out of control, it's actually a really, really brilliant, sort of thinking on it. But not to say we wouldn't partner with the right investor or the right group at some point. We'd love to meet people in the space that would be good partners because, I think there are definitely situations where his model doesn't really, it could be, sort of changed for, a variety of reasons. That's just the way we've gone to date. And we really do focus on keeping our burn rate really low. And that's just through doing clever, creative ways to really hack away at expenses and find backdoor shortcuts to things where, we can, cut out a couple of steps or just be more decisive on things in terms of what we're building or how much time we're going to spend on something, or, what we'll do with our time. Because for us, we really need to look at high value targets in terms of use of time. And so the actually acts as a nice constraint for that. And it also forces us to be pretty creative in how we go about things. So, there are times where it's gotten a little tight. I'm sure that we're not the first people to go through that.
When I was starting my business, there's actually an audiobook version of Rework, and I would actually listen to that over and over when I was running on a treadmill, just to kind of get me motivated and stimulating ideas on how to get my business going. So it's so cool to hear that you have a personal relationship with him.
Yeah, it was really weird. We got to this thing, and we're not best friends or anything, but we got to this event and got to hear him speak one night, and it was a really interesting guy, and I obviously they built something special there. And I wasn't aware of this at the time, but Jeff Bezos is actually their only investor, and I guess the story it was really a need. It was more to de-risk the equation for the founders and for them to get some kind of take some risk off the table for them. But really, really interesting history and story they have. So yeah, Rework is definitely a great book. I'd recommend that for sure for anyone listening.
Yeah, I think Jeff Bezos' investment was more of like an exit almost for Jason and David, because they were able to just pocket the money basically. So they took that approach instead of trying to scale their business or something that way. Do you use any lean startup methodology? For example, in the early days, did you make a MVP, minimum viable product?
Yeah, we did. We definitely utilized some of that thinking in our early days, and we are lucky to have one of our board members is one of the original founders of IDEO and on their health and wellness team and leads that practice. And so we've actually been really fortuitous to have some of that influence early on in our MVPs. And so one of the first things we did was to really just test a lot of these sort of hypotheses around how do you actually change someone's behavior and around sleep, and how do you get it to matter in a meaningful way. And so we would run these almost internal, like clinical sort of trials with students, where we would take a group of students and we run them through an iteration of our product. And then we track them for several months and watch what happened. And so we would do all these different sort of variations of that and see sort of what was working. And then we'd look at the data, and then we'd interview all the students and would use that to inform our design process. This is really great. We've, our board member, Dennis Boyle over at IDEO, was really influential in helping us sort of get that thinking early on. And it's hard to understand like what components of this are actually working, because one of the things we never want to be, or never did want to be, was had this just be like a snake oil type solution where there's nothing that provides evidence that it's working. And so we've really been hard critics from the beginning of measuring things and making sure that it's sticking and changing in terms of behaviors. So we track a ton of things when somebody goes through Somni. We track obviously the quantity and the quality of sleep, but a whole bunch of other things that we know are downstream affected by sleep. So we're always tracking things like, creativity or alertness or ability to manage stress and happiness and things like that are really sort of, they're like secondary consequences of good sleep or bad sleep. Early on, our MVPs were these sort of, we had them lying around somewhere, but these really hacked together kits. We called them sleep boxes originally. And they were just things that we would buy off the shelf, and we would make these little inserts of these. Before we built our site or any of the software behind it, we put these little sort of copy packets together of some content to show the students how to sleep better, and we would give them a lecture on sleep, and then we do these follow-up sessions with them and sort of quasi coaching, and we use that to sort of mesh and massage everything together through different trials and put them together. And actually, our first client, we actually didn't really have a full fleshed out product. We had more of an idea that we sold them on and some proof of concept data. And then from there, we used that to actually drive really our first V1 of the product. So we used that income to build that out and go from there. So it was kind of it was kind of an interesting process early on. We were really hacking things together just to try and see what was working and what we need to let go of.
I'm kind of curious about this strategy for keeping your burn rate low. What are some of the things that you did? Like for example, me, I lived with my parents for a little while when I was getting business going, and also lately I've been using outsourcing, like having overseas developers help me build the product. But is there anything that you've been doing that's kind of unique?
Keeping expenses as low as possible. So I first of all, eating out or sort of anything that can be gone away with, I tried to remove completely. So, gotten really good at cooking, taking care of as many things on my own that I can to reduce my expenses. And this is actually, in so many ways, it's really great for expanding your skill set. But there's this blog that I follow. His name's Mr. Money Mustache. And it's a guy, I don't know if you guys have ever run into this gentleman who retired when he was, I think in his, mid-30s, because he was just this very aggressive saver, and he rode his bike everywhere to work and things like that. And so everything from cutting out any unnecessary expenses to finding different hacks at restaurants. So one of these things, I figured out how you can eat a meal at Chipotle for under $3 if I do go out. Whenever I go to California, like when I met with Daniel at the Y Combinator event, I stay with one of our co-founders at his parents' house, which is about like an hour north of Mountain View, and I just take the BART and the train and the Caltrain in, or if I'm lucky, they'll let me use one of their cars sometimes. So things like that to keep expenses low, and so basically can cut my traveling costs in half. I fly Spirit all the time, so Spirit has become my favorite airline of choice. So if anyone who hasn't used Spirit, because I heard bad things about them, I would give them a second look. They certainly allow your money to go further, and they are getting better at customer service. Then other things in terms of us on our team side, we all of our team members, if they're co-founders, it's it's equity based, and so and we have sort of agreements upon anything above a certain threshold in terms of earnings, that how we share that. And then if we do use anyone outside, it's typically on retainers and milestone performance basis. One of our creative ways early on was, hey, look, we think, we'd love to work with, say, for example, a designer or, for some subset of, we do all our own development in-house. So that's really nice. But if, if we work with a designer, we would say, hey, look, here's a retainer. Our retainer wouldn't, nearly cover all the work they would do, but we would say, hey, here's this bit up front, and then if we do well as a company, and we'll tie our sort of new users or sort of revenue milestones to performance, and then you'll get paid accordingly. So we try and incentivize everyone on the team to cooperate and behave well, and that I think has been another one of those useful things to keeping expenses low, and then everybody on the same page.
I think I told Matt this when we met in person, but when me and Michael started Dr. Chrono, we started without any venture capital. And there's one hack that I used to do with my co-founder is if you have a cup of coffee from Starbucks, you can actually get as many refills as you want. And we used to do that in the early days when we first started because we didn't have any revenue and we didn't have any users. So we literally would just drink a lot of coffee at Starbucks over and over and over again if you just keep the cup.
Can you use it on like multiple days, like come back and have the same cup?
You're not supposed to, but you can. And we used to take advantage of that. Yeah,
that's a good idea.
That's a great one. Yeah. It's funny when you don't have a lot of customers or any revenue in the early days. It's really easy to decide what to keep and what not to keep, and where there might be loopholes. It's kind of funny how the mind works.
And I'm kind of curious, have you had any kind of near-death experiences in your business? Not like actual death, but in the scope of your business?
We definitely have. Early on, we had a moment where we were working. It was very, very early on. This was a while ago now, where we were working, and we weren't sure, some of the early people on the team, if things were going to work out in terms of where the product was going, and if we had funding to keep going, or how this is actually going to get done. There was definitely some points that were pretty dark in terms of, look, we're not sure. We need revenue right now, or an investor, and thankfully we were able to always grab a customer. And yeah, there's definitely been a couple periods where we've had some near-death experiences.
Yeah, one thing I always think about with startups in general, it's more of a mental game than anything. It's not your competitors. It's not any external forces. It's really the force of the will of the founders. to push the company forward in the early days and throughout the life of the company. I feel like if you're not mentally pushing the company yourself, I generally think competitors, they're in the equation, but they're not as much as like the team itself. And that's just something I always perceived in terms of like Dr. Chrono. I'm like, if me and my co-founder are mentally 100% committed to our company, we will figure it out. And I think you're in that mindset, Matt, where you're pushing through walls to make the company successful. Being in that mindset, actually, it will bring you to the next level. It's almost like climbing a mountain, in my perception, where you're like a 90-degree vertical road, where you have to go up this road, which is miles and miles and miles. If you're willing to do that, you will make progress. Pushing through those walls, you got into startup school. Tell us what your experience was going through startup school. I actually was an advisor of startup school for the classes, one of the advisors helping a batch go through. For you, what was one takeaway or two takeaways after the class, your 10-week course ended? When you walked away from that, what was one or two pieces of advice for people that you took away?
I think one of the things that really helped us in the program, and we had, and Daniel, I'd like to, before I forget, ask you about pushing through these walls and some of your experiences, and how if you have any advice there. We had a great mentor. His name is Tim Treffren, one of the co-founders of Mixpanel. I think of it as sort of a different or a better version of Google Analytics, a way to track events on sites. But one of the things he really impressed upon us was weekly progress and documenting that and being disciplined about how you're spending your time. And one of the things we did in the program was we'd have a weekly check-in of either our change in users or change in revenue for the week. Did you add users or did you add revenue? And if you didn't, why not? And if you did, why? And those questions really helped in terms of sort of acting as a North Star for the business and for what we were doing with our time. And so, in driving decisions, because I think one of the things we had been hung up with is, I don't remember who said this, but sort of the idea like don't play house in terms of unless you're selling things or adding users or making meaningful differences, you're not really a company. And for us, that was really powerful in terms of driving forward in terms of how are we thinking about this? And if it's not working right now, what do we need to change, in the future so that it does change? We're not necessarily like a business that we measure active monthly users in terms of, that is important to us, but since we're more of a B2B focus, that's not necessarily something that we track like a Twitter or a Facebook or Airbnb, but us finding metrics that matter for us in terms of our funnel and how we go about getting new customers, that was really helpful. And the other big thing I would say is just the ability to think objectively about problems. Tim had a really great way of like, here's a situation we're dealing with, and what do we need to change about it to get the results we want, and being okay with making these tough decisions, such as when to let somebody go if it's not working out, or making a hard pivot on a product decision that's clearly or not clearly working, but it might be in the gray area, but being able to sort of throw it away and move to the next thing. So overall, it was a fantastic experience, and we're super thankful to the Y Combinator group for one, putting it on, and two, letting us participate. We really enjoyed it and thought it was really meaningful for the company.
Berg actually saw the talks as well and watched several of the talks. I didn't see all of the talks, actually. I've seen several of them, but I think that's actually spot on. And growth is a super important metric, and growth in some area, that focus really, really can help a company. You only have so many hours in the day. You have to really think about, you can only do so much in the day. What's going to make the biggest impact for your company every single day? And I ask myself that question every morning. I wake up and I say, what is going to make the biggest impact? And biggest impact, those two numbers that you mentioned, that those metrics, that's a very focused way of thinking about that. And that's actually a really good way to think about that.
Are those the main two metrics you're tracking, number of users and revenue?
We track engagements or groups or individuals, really groups in the funnel that we think could be meaningful relationships with customers. So, we focus on B2B, such as schools or companies or athletic teams. And so for us, what's really important is one, so the volume of new groups that are added to the funnel and their velocity through the funnel. That to us is really our true north on the B2B side. When the users go through, we're always tracking their improvement levels. That's more of an internal metric it's not necessarily, it's part of the business, but not on more of the financial side of the business.
I'm kind of curious what the best or most worthwhile investment you've made is. It could be like in terms of money or time or energy.
One of our early clients was the university, and a relationship that we pursued for quite a long time, to the point where many times we thought the deal was gonna go south, and really weren't sure what to make of it, what was going to happen. And it turned out to be a very, very good event for us in terms of, early on, it was a very great learning experience. We got a tremendous amount of users from it. We had not only that, but we learned a ton along the way in terms of what was working, what was not. And for us, every user that goes to the product, and this is probably the same for every company, but we were looking at it as so important to get these users so we could figure out what was working and change it quickly, because that was something that we knew we needed users, one, for revenue, but even more important than that, we knew we needed them to make the product better for the next future users that would come through. I think one of the best investments we ever did there was just sticking with this relationship persistently and really taking time. And it took, now to think about it, almost a year to actually get this very first, early big customer. It really paid off in terms of sort of having that dogged persistence to track them down and make that a reality. And I think it's been a really success on both ends of the party. So that would be, I guess, the time investment there, I'd say, has been our best use of sort of investment so far.
I'm kind of curious where our audience could learn more about you or your business, maybe the company website.
They can find us online at puresomni.com. That's Pure, and then Somni, which is S as in Sam, O, N as in Matt, N as in Nancy, I.com. Somni is the opposite of insomnia, so it's Latin for sleep. So pure sleep is kind of what it translates to. I always love emails, and I always make myself accessible. So I'm at matt@puresomni.com. One thing I have too, I'm curious, Daniel, you mentioned before pushing through walls. I don't know if you have any advice you could share there for folks who are, obviously way behind you, but are looking up to your guys' progress. Anything you could offer in terms of lessons learned or mental tricks to make those hurdles and leaps?
Me and Greg both have a few hacks that we do throughout our lives. Greg has been running his company. I'm running my company. I think one of the things that helps me is to really kind of set my mind right in the morning and in like a positive mind frame. So I'll either do a quick workout in the morning, do something to get my body moving, think about something extremely positive that's going to take the day and set it right. One of the hacks that I do, and I do because, when you're running a company a long time, and the goal for me is to run this company that I'm running for a long time, you really do have to take care of yourself. So I think a lot of founders sort of forget about themselves a lot of the time, and they don't eat right. They don't work out. They don't just take care of themselves, and they kind of get into a bad mind frame where they can't sustain that level of stress that a startup is going to put you through. Be sure to definitely, if you're committed to this for like a long time, you only get one body, right? And that body's going to take you through this startup. So you have to take care of your body so you could kind of push the company to the next level with your right health. And sleep is part of that. That's why, I actually commend you for what you're doing. I feel like working out, sleeping, eating right, some of the best founders, if you really look at them, they're doing those three things. And for me, I always look at some of the most successful companies out there. Like if you look at, let's take an example, like say Steve Jobs, right? He had a very regimented, healthy diet. He actually forced that diet onto a lot of people at Apple. I don't know if you know this. They were eating much healthier because he really believed in a healthier lifestyle. And if you look at a lot of the startups in the Valley, some of the best founders, they really just take care of themselves. They're not just pushing forward on their company, but they're trying to figure out that right balance. And it's not easy to do that, but you try to make it work. And you're not going to always have that balance, but you're going to try and just keep that in your mind that you're almost like an athlete where you have to sustain a high level of progress over a long period of time. And if you don't focus on yourself, how is the company going to move forward, right? It's that part of it. So I look at companies almost like teams where you have a football team or a baseball team. These teams work really well together. The dynamic is there. The best teams in the world, they hand the ball off very easily to each other, and they have a great coach, and the coach is pushing them, and they're really pushing themselves, and the communication is working well. Teams like that are like startups, where if you are doing all of those things right, you will move to that next level. I actually view sports very similar to startups in that way.
I wasn't sure if I would get into this or not, but I'll just throw it out there. I actually struggled with sleep a lot as well in college, and I ended up taking William Dement's class at Stanford. I was really inspired by that. I personally struggle with insomnia, and I tried actually some of the behavioral interventions you're describing, but it still wasn't enough. Like I would go to bed and my mind would just be racing, and I'd have a morning class, and I'm very committed to school, so I would oftentimes go to it, but then just get very sleep deprived, and that would be kind of a downward spiral when I'm constantly sleep deprived. But like for me early on, it was just like trying to change my environment so I could like just work with that sleep problem. So for example, allow myself to sleep whenever I could, maybe at naps during the day. I still didn't get it fixed actually for many years. And it was when I read Ray Kurzweil's book with Terry Grossman, where he talked about taking supplements to try to engineer your own biology in a way. So I started taking melatonin and GABA and L-theanine, and that helped a whole lot. That was a major improvement for me. Because I was so inspired by that book, I ended up reaching out directly to Dr. Terry Grossman, and I told him I want to do the quantitative health approach. I want to try to measure like everything I possibly can in my body and just try to optimize it. And so he had executive health tests, like kind of checklists of lots of different things, T cell count or like cholesterol. I can't even remember all the biomarkers. Basically, doing that big scan, he was able to catch a hormone problem I had. My thyroid was low, and my testosterone was low, and my DHEA was low. Once that had been identified, he was able to really quickly tell me sort of the solution, like taking thyroid medicine, for example. And once that hormone problem had been fixed, my sleeping was like perfect. So that insomnia went away, and like kind of the fatigue problems went away. That's something that made a huge impact on my life. Blood testing is super, super important.
I've heard similar accounts of people who work with functional medicine, doctors. Sounds like that was sort of what you're doing, or no?
Yeah. He does take that approach, like sort of preventative medicine. People that are healthy and like just try and optimize as much as possible. You can actually go to Bangkok and get big blood panels. There are certain like medical tourism hospitals in Bangkok that provide that for like really cheap. So that would be another approach to try to catch those problems.
Did you ever do one of those?
I flew out to Bangkok actually and actually did exactly that. It's good to do it every year. Even if you're healthy, you can see what your biomarker is like when you're in healthy normal status. And then, down the road, like maybe 10 years from now, you'll be feeling bad. And you can do that same sort of body scan and then compare it to your baseline of when you're healthy and be able to sort of see a lot better what's off. Everybody's body is different. Maybe your level of like thyroid or something or testosterone is at a certain level when you're healthy, but it's like off compared to the average. So you'll be able to see those little differences in your own specific biology.
Something where it's like an order of magnitude cheaper, or like 30%, or
like literally like $500 for like a whole body scan, including like going on a treadmill, EKG, ultrasounds of your organs, like blood panels, and that's like probably a 10x, 20x difference, I'm guessing, that you get in the US.
How was William Dement's class?
That was super inspiring. Like he's a legend. He also got into some really interesting topics beyond sleep health itself. Like for example, lucid dreaming. I was curious if you would talk about that. Lucid dreaming is when you are dreaming, but then wake up in your sleep and then can kind of control your dream. Like if you're conscious in your dream, you can just decide to be on the beach, for example, and it feels like you're on the beach. So it's almost like a virtual reality experience that you can control.
Super fascinating topic.
Yeah, well, I guess, Matt, I just like to ask if you have any requests or asks from our audience that you'd like them to do, or any parting words.
If you know someone that's struggling with sleep or struggle with sleep yourself, I would definitely just encourage you to take a look at what we're working on at puresomni.com. or reach out to me directly if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to chat. Look for us as a household name coming to you in the next couple of years for sleep. We have a lot in the works in terms of what we're hoping to build. We're just excited and grateful to have the opportunity to share this with folks.
Thank you, Matt, for being here and taking the time.
Thank you so much, Matt, for being on.
Thanks. Yeah, it was awesome. This was a lot of fun, guys.